Here we are for video number 3. This video we're going to look at frequency and what we can do to make things more transparent within a mix. Obviously some people like the depth or the analog feel you get from having a bit of muddiness in your mix, which is totally fine. Depends on what your preferences are. For the sake of this mix, I'm going to be looking at cleaning up the mix, creating a bit of transparency, or a bit more transparency, as well as keeping the power where it's required. I'm going to be using the multimeter that we set up in video 2. Basically what we're going to be doing is looking at this graph from 0 up to 20k, and basically what we'll be looking for is a reasonably flat line or response that travels across the grid from 0 to 20, and then we'll be making adjustments to take out some of the low end, usually between 0 and I normally go for about 60 hertz. We kind of want to cut this chunk out, and what that does is that clears up some of the space essentially for a later stage. It takes away some of the power. So when we look down here at our stereo output, the frequency content essentially makes this bar go up higher. It's obviously a bit more complicated than that, but the frequency content makes up the content of the song, which adds to the decibel level, essentially, sort of. So by taking out chunks that most people don't really hear, because our audible range kind of dips out in this region, there's almost no point in having it, arguably, and that's a subjective thing, but there's some, some would say that it's arguably not worth having it. So if we cut that out, that gives us an extra bit of room in this region to work with loudness, which is another stage. So that's one of the transparency elements that can be done. And you've got other problem areas, other regions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I sort of analyze. And what I do is on the multimeter, I have the hold button selected, and I have it set to infinite. So what this is going to do, this is going to measure the peaks and plot them out on the graph, so we get a nice visual representation. Obviously, while it's playing, you have the real-time movement, so the bar's going up and down as the song plays. But having this peak hold button selected, that will allow you, the multimeter to plot those highest points on the graph. So you can see that it's plotting out for us. So now I've paused it, our hold button has sort of created this plotted graph for us, which gives us a kind of visual representation of the frequency response of the entire mix. In this area, of course, we haven't got to these louder sections during the chorus, but this is just for this part, and I'm quite happy with that. That's a reasonably flat response. It tails off a bit between 16k and 20k, which are this little dip here, which is obviously, we can make adjustments to that. But this kind of just lets us know that we've got quite a powerful low end. We've got a few dips in the low mids, and then we got a reasonably flat response with a few drops in the mids, and then it kind of starts slowly tapering off on the high end, which is, if we want transparency and clarity, we kind of want to we want to bring that up a bit during the mixing stage before it goes to the master. And you know, you can see clearly here we've got the 125 region, and we've got a nice little peak there, which, you know, is not too bad. We might be able to bring that down a little bit, which might help with other harmonics. Essentially, if, for example, you were to multiply this number by 2, and you look at the 250 region, if you were to make a boost there, it sort of affects the other multiples of that number. So if I was to make a heavy boost in 125, it would create some kind of harmonic resonance with 250 and so on, and 500 and all of that. So, you know, if you, as you make adjustments, you got to sort of have that sort of stuff in mind at a later stage. It's not really that relevant. That's more a nerd thing, which is good to know, at least. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this region, so I'm going to go to a bit more of a powerful section of the song. So I'm going to loop this section and have a little look. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do, 'cause I wanna be right. It's time to see. Okay, so now we've got a bit more of a powerful section. We can see clearly now we've got a pretty high peak in the 60 hertz region, and then we got this nice kind of climb, but we're kind of lacking in these lows. So what I'd, you know, with this information, I'd probably sit there and maybe write it down, which I'm not doing. I'm pretending to do that, but I'd probably write this down and sort of make a note of what areas I want to boost. So obviously you don't want to just go to your stereo output and put an EQ on and add these things to your, that's kind of a mastering method. But what we want to do is sort of, now that we've got this information, we want to go through the instruments and sort of say, okay, we want to kind of boost, we want to get some more above the 16K region, we want to take away a bit of this low end and boost these low mids. So we kind of go through the song and I solo these sections, and by looking at these sections and their frequency content, you can sort of determine which individual elements are problematic to the entire mix. So you can see right there, that's probably got a big thing to do with the peaks in that region. So, you know, you combine that with the kit. So it sounds pretty good, but you know, I can still kind of feel that we can do something with that bass guitar. So I'm going to come down and work with, let's work with Logic's built-in linear phase EQ. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to round it off at about the 69 mark. So you just want to play around, go up to 72. Okay, so I've just kind of rounded off that corner. So another thing that I'd like to use, I will use, is Slate Digital, because I really do like their stuff. I use the FGN, and I kind of just filter out directly where I don't like, and I'm going for the 67 mark. I'm going to boost it up a little bit and just go for that extreme. Now play that together. So we've lost a little bit of power there, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of line on this, which you can also do. I mean, equivalent of that on the EQ here would be by giving it a bit of a gain boost, but you know, I tend to stay away from that kind of thing, just because I don't really trust it. Okay, so my story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. So we've also got to look at this bass guitar and think, what is it missing? So I'm going to solo that. I'm going to take this off now because it's just a huge peak there. So I'm going to actually come down. I've got a thing called Native Instruments Enhance EQ. Now we're lacking severely in the lower range, lower mid range. So I'm just going to go for an extreme boost. I'm going to go for a cut again on the 20s, on the 60s, sorry. So here that's kind of cleared it up a lot if we take away that previous filter. Just a case of playing around with tools and seeing what you can do to make it clearer. So I've given it a severe boost in the 2K region, which is around here on the graph, and that seems to have cleared it up quite a lot. But now obviously you've got to listen to it with other elements to see what it sounds like. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to now listen to it in the whole mix. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do, 'cause I wanna be right. Okay, you can see we've taken away that big peak, so I'm just going to bring this down again to about 2.83. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do. Okay, so we've definitely targeted that spike. If we go for our EQ again, I just like to bring these down to not hugely destructive levels. We're not using this, so I'm just doing that. What I've done also is I've added a bit of gain through the enhanced EQ, which just kind of brings up those the other levels, like where we've taken away. I always like to re-add to kind of bring it back to some similar level or relatable level. Okay, so forgetting the bass now, looking at the whole mix again. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. So I'm gonna look at synths. This is where we can probably catch up a bit of the 16K to 20K region. So what I might do, you know, I've got these grouped here. I might just test out what it sounds like to give them just a total boost. So I might just try something like a passive EQ. Obviously you can just use something like the linear phase. Turn everything off other than your high pass. Go from, say, well, you just go for your 10K region. Tighten up the Q factor. If we just turn our passive off, play that. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do, 'cause I wanna be right. It's time to see my story. I'm sorry. And obviously that's not really doing much for me personally, so I'd be getting rid of that. So I'll go back to our my story. I'm sorry. So because we've got so much stuff going on in there, just adding it to that group isn't really doing much for us. So you've got to listen to the individual elements again and see which ones. So this range, this is right in our mids. I'd like to flatten that up a bit. So again, with the enhanced EQ, I might put it up to, let's say, 14K, just see what a huge boost sounds like. I'm going to cut it at about 120. Take off about 1.8, maybe 2. Show me what you do, 'cause I wanna be right. It's time to see. Okay, so I've changed it to 18K, keep that boost, and deduction at 120 for this. Oh, hold up. What am I doing? Stupid. Okay, so X. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do. Okay, sorry, that's better. So now it's actually on the track that we wanted. It's doing those additions and deductions to the arpeggiator directly before the effects, which is just that effect that I put on before, which I believe is EQ'd. Oh no, we turned that off, or I turned that off. So I'm actually going to lower this because I think it's a bit annoying sometimes. Okay, you might not be able to hear it there, but that's definitely taken away some of the muddiness. A, to get out of that automation zone. Okay, so I'm going to have a little listen to this. in the 30 region, I'm going to do a pretty harsh cut. See, because most of this is, you know, for most people that's inaudible. You can't hear that. So there's no point in essentially having it. You can just go for a 10, a full whack cut. And most people won't even know it. So if you take that away, the instant peak is at -9. If we put it cut on, see if it makes any difference. See there, we've got an instant -12, 10.2. Obviously, that the initial peak was a bit lower than that. So we've gained a lot of headroom essentially from that track by getting rid of that low 30 frequency. We don't need that content, so we're taking it away, which allows us to have a bit more room in the future, which is good. So these are the kind of things we want to be doing. So now we listen to this one. Definitely that one's muddy. That's quite cool actually, I quite like it. I want to add a bit more to the 8K region, so again I'm going to just go with the same old thing, go up to the 8K, boost it. I'm going to go for a slightly wider thing, boost it by about 2.6. You can hear that's really not doing it nice. So I'm going to go a bit higher. I'm going to go 10, widen up the Q factor, boost it by an extreme amount so I can hear the changes. So what I've done here, I've gone down to the power region, which is that 30 region, which is the sub bass, which we've taken away from that other one. So we want a little bit of it in this, because this is kind of the meat of the bass section of the synths. So what I've done is I've taken that cut, whacked it up full blast, which has killed the power of it. But then what I'm doing is as I'm listening, I'm deducting the amount that I've taken away until I get to a point where I think that sounds reasonable. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to listen to the whole synth section. Okay, we got this one here, which is I'm going to guess is a hugely MIDI. I personally don't want to make any changes to that. I'm listening to this synth section, I think it sounds pretty good. I like it, so I'm going to hit save and just have a little listen to it with different elements. Bring in the beat. So now listening to that synthy bass. Oh, I've done it again. Okay, so I've been editing on the bloody whole thing when it should be on that. So this is going to sound different now. So what I was doing is I was putting the enhanced EQ, which I wanted on this track, like that, onto the summing stack, the folder. So I was doing the right edits when I was listening to it on its own, but it wasn't applied directly to the track. So now I was listening to that thinking, no, that sounds a bit horrible, but okay, so we're lacking, it's missing quite a bit. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go with a compressor, purely using it just to boost those low parts of the transients. So the waveform I'm taking away from it, so I need to add a little bit of makeup just so it comes back overall. So really I need to listen to this on its own. So I want to find it's about the I want to start compressing here, and then what I'm going to do is use the makeup gain to bring those lows up by a bit. I don't really want to be doing too much, so I'm just going to listen to this with the entire 2 sections. Okay, it's not too bad. So I've EQ'd away some low frequencies, the muddy stuff, and I've boosted the rest essentially using EQ, makeup gain. I've just basically tried to get the threshold to sit just above where it would peak. I just want to see this needle just moving a tiny bit, so you know that it's actually creating a resistance against those peaks. And then I'm basically making up, which kind of flattens the entire waveform and brings up the lows. I'm not the ratio is set to a fairly low one, so it's not really, if the needle is working, it's not going flat out on it. Okay, so I'm just gonna have a little listen to the whole thing. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. So I'm gonna do this. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Okay, so you can see here all we've done really, we've kind of rounded off these bits, have taken away quite a bit from these low ends in the bass section. I've added a bit here. This graph is obviously just a sort of representation at that point in time, so it's probably going to be worth pausing and seeing if I've made much of a difference. Obviously visually, you don't want to be mixing visually, you just want to be using these as kind of representations. You always want to use your ears, and I've made a change from my ears. For my ears, I'm using headphones, but these are the kind of things you want to be doing. You want to be taking away things you don't need, and clearing up some regions to add some of the frequency you want. So I've taken away a lot of the dirty sort of bass stuff that's not really heard. There's more to be done. I've no way have I even finished this. This is just, you know, a quick kind of mess about with different elements. You know, I'd probably have to go through some of these guitar parts and add, like this section, I'd add some I give that a bit of a boost so I can hear some of the higher frequencies a bit better. I'd probably go up for about 14k, give a boost and widen it out so it spreads across, and you know, see what that sounds like. So 12k, you can see, you can hear it quite a bit. So we'll see what that sounds like. It's a huge boost, but it should break through the mix a lot more. For the sake of it, also, I'd go down to this region, completely cut the 30s. My story. I'm sorry, I missed it again. Show me what you do, 'cause I wanna be right. It's time to see my story. So yeah, you know, just looking at it, you just want to kind of create a flatter line with obviously a bit of power in the low end. We kind of eventually want to get looking at these regions like the 500 region. I mean, this is kind of cool having a bit of a dip, because between 500 and 600 is a quite muddy zone for guitars and things like that. So, you know, you want these kind of slight peaks in the high mids, or in the mids and the high mids and the higher frequencies, as well as a bit of a peak between 70 and 150. You know, you kind of want a bit of a boost there if you want that transparent sort of sound. So yeah, that's been a sort of overview of EQing using the multimeter and a bit of adding a bit of transparency. So yeah, that's it for this video. Hope it's been helpful. Onwards and upwards.